Okay, so for my section of the presentation, I am going to be talking about the beneficial insects that you don't see. And that is just my funny little way to say we're talking about the itty bitties, the little guys, the guys that go unnoticed, or the guys that just you don't think are as beneficial as they actually are. So get ready. We're going to go on a little journey under the microscope and really immerse ourselves into this micro ecosystems that are literally all around us. And so here is just an example of a few observations that I have made under the microscope, and they are not really important to this talk at all, but it's just one way to show that there are so many things out there around us that we don't actually notice because they're too small for us to notice. So all of these, this fly, this aphid-like insect, and this mite, they're all smaller than the tip of a pencil. So these are things that happen underneath our eyes all the time, and we don't realize it is because of how small they are. So if there's one thing that defines my personality is that I love the microscope. I could spend my whole life just looking under the microscope and so much so that I will get up and my legs are numb. And then the other thing about this presentation is I really love an underdog, which I'm sure a lot of us do like underdogs. So not saying there's anything wrong with this beautiful giant swallowtail butterfly. I love to see them just as much as the next guy. But when I get the chance to see this guy over here on the right, who is a predatory mite, and they have ginormous mandibles that they literally just leave open like this, and then they wait for prey, which is a smaller mite or insect, to come by and just close it. And so they are beneficial predatory insects that are about the size of a grain of salt. So they're about zero point 0.5 to zero point 0.6 millimeters long. So they're really, really small. And so, and the point of this is not to make you sound like you have to go full crazy, like I have gone full crazy and just obsess over these tiny, imperceivably small insects and mites. Um, but really, what I want you to end up taking out of this part of the presentation is that both of these arthropods on the screen are very beneficial in their own right. One is a pollinator, one is a predator, and they're both worthy of conserving, even though one of them you can't really see with your naked eye. So that's the moral of the story. All right, so I'm going to start with letting us ease into this, and we're going to start with something a little familiar. Bees. So we're all familiar with the bee grouping. Jackie mentioned it a little bit. But are we fully aware? Do we fully comprehend how diverse the grouping of bees are? So I have three pictures here and three pictures of very diverse bees. We have giant carpenter bees, which are like the size of your thumb. And then we have metallic bees, for example, the sweat bees. Metallic bees and sweat bees are my favorite kind of bees. And so those ones with varying sizes, and then you have the leafcutter bees um, that hold their pollen on their abdomen. So in this structure called a scopa, which is a little bit different from, the honeybees that hold their pollen on their hind legs. So three pictures, and already there's crazy amounts of diversity. But of course, this is my presentation, so I want to talk about size. There's a big size diversity between bees as well that we don't always realize. So we have giant carpenter bees. This is the head of a carpenter bee. And for size scale depiction, there's is the smallest species of bee. It's a mining bee. We do not have this species in Florida, um, but we do have similar sized species here in Florida. So again, even within the bees, there is this crazy amount of diversity and size diversity. I'm sorry. And but of course, this presentation, we're talking about the underdogs. So let's talk about some other pollinators, and Jackie already mentioned a lot of them. So we have flies, for example. Flies are some of my favorite pollinators. Jackie mentioned the The bee flies, which I do really like bee flies as well. Over here, I have an example of a trumpet flower that's attracting a whole bunch of flies. But my favorite pollinating flies are the syrphid flies or the hover flies. Not so much because they're pollinators as adults, which they are pollinators as adults, and you can see two pictures of adults in the center. But my favorite thing about them is they're actually voracious predators as larvae. And I find this to be extra interesting because if you know anything about fly larvae, is they are actually just basically bags of goo. They're just like water balloons filled with hemolymph, which is just goo. And so they're really, really fragile on my scale. So if I'm looking at one under a microscope, I touch it the wrong way and it just pops. And so I think about something that's so fragile on my scale, but when you get down to the scale that they operate on, so you have one here eating an aphid, they're actually really effective predators. So I find that to be fascinating. You have really effective predators as the immatures, and then they're beneficial pollinators as an adult. So it's a win-win situation with the syrphid flies. Um, but of course, there's a whole cast of pollinators. Jackie mentioned a lot of them. We have beetles, we have moths that are important with the night blooming flowers. We have vertebrates like bats and birds and humans. Humans are really important pollinators these days. I don't know about you, but if you have like squash or something, you just take that male flower and just hand pollinate yourself. So there's a whole bunch of organisms that are important in the pollinating sphere that also deserve recognition in addition to the bees and the butterflies. But I don't want to spend too much time on pollinators because they're interesting, they're good, but I am really interested in predators and parasitoids. So that's what I'm going to focus on for the next bit of the presentation. But there are many other ecosystem services that insects provide. And so some of those are decomposers, breaking down dead material. They are the baseline of most food webs. They're really important soil engineers, and they also are primary producers for stuff like honey and silk, but also for stuff like medicine and even pesticides. So they're really important for making products that we use on the daily basis. Um, but I'm going to focus on the predators and the parasitoids, and they can be a little hard to differentiate. So, in order to get it straight in our heads, predators are insects, or they can be anything that will eat many prey throughout their lifetime. So, for example, I have lady beetles who will eat hundreds of aphids within their life cycle. And then when you have parasitoids, it sometimes is confused with parasites, and every now and again they'll be used interchangeably. But in reality, parasites are going to be more. Um, they are organisms that live in or on a host for their entire life, and they don't usually kill their hosts because if they kill their hosts, they're out of a home and out of a food source. Whereas parasitoids, they are almost always insects, and they are insects that lay their eggs in or on their host, and the larval stage or the immature stage of that insect will continue to eat the insides of their host. And then once they mature, usually they kill their host and then they become free living adults. So that's kind of the difference between predators and parasitoids. We're definitely going to go more into parasitoids in a second. All right, so this slide is just me saying I have a bit of a bone to pick because I grew up in the age of the internet and I was inundated in meme culture. And I, since the day I was born, everyone just seems to love on bees, and yet wasps never get the same kind of love. And I never understood it. Everyone just thinks bees are wonderful and amazing. They pollinate, they make honey, and for some reason, wasps are just incarnations of the devil, apparently, and they just exist to sting people and do crime. And I would hope if you're one of those people that signed up for this webinar, you don't fall into that trap. But you probably know people that fall into this trap. And so after this presentation, I do expect if anyone sees any of this coming through their Facebook feed, it's a requirement now that you have to be in the comment section and defend the WASP and their honor, because I've had enough of WASP slander. And I think you guys will have enough of WASP slander too when we're done with this. Um, So no more of this. Wasps and bees are both beneficial. But why? Like, why am I so adamant about preserving the reputation of wasps? Well, they do a lot of beneficial things. First of all, they also pollinate. I think people seem to forget about that because wasps don't always have specialized pollen structures like bees have. So, honeybees have the corbicula, which is where they carry the honey, or carry the pollen on their hind legs. Most wasps don't have that. But most wasps, as adults, they feed on nectar, and that's where they get their energy source. So they're also hopping from flower to flower carrying pollen. So they do pollinate. Sometimes they're incidental, and sometimes they're really important. So, like the fig wasps, these are the ones in the lower right. It's one of the coolest looking wasps ever. But they are the primary pollinators of most fig species. So, also really important pollinators as well. But where wasps really shine, and my favorite aspect of them, is their beneficial parasitoids. And so I briefly described what a parasitoid was, and I don't know if it really clicked for you guys what they are, so I'm going to go through a little scenario. And we're going to see just kind of how metal wasps actually are. So imagine you're a little aphid and you're the bane of most gardeners' existence. So you're just with your family gathering together and you're building up your population really, really fast. And aphids can do this because they don't have to mate to reproduce. They have this thing called parthenogenesis, so they reproduce asexually. And then not only that, they also can have live birth. So you don't even have the egg stage. An aphid will just squirt out a new aphid, and then it's already starting to feed and then creating new aphids itself. So their populations can get out of control really fast, and I'm sure you've noticed that. But have no fear, the wasps are here. Um, and so here is just one of the hundreds, thousands of species of wasps that are so small, imperceivably small. I wish I could accurately describe to you how small. They're about zero point 0.8 millimeters. So again, really small, but it just doesn't compute in your brains. And they will come in, and rather than using their ovipositor to sting us like some other wasps, they use their ovipositor to inject an egg inside the aphid. And so inside these aphids, there's a wasp egg and soon to be a wasp larva moving inside of it and feeding on the aphid. And eventually, the aphid will succumb to the wasp larva that's living inside of it, literally eating it from the inside out. And once it's done, it will pupate inside the husk or the mummy of the aphid, and it will chew its way out through an exit hole, and then it will emerge to go inject more babies into more aphids. And so these guys are super, super common. They are everywhere, even though we don't notice them because they are so small. They're smaller than the gnats that get stuck to your face when you're really sweaty and you walk through like a cloud of them. Like they're really small and they're everywhere, but we don't notice them. Um, all right. So other things about while we're fangirling over wasps, wasps are also really, really large. So they have a crazy size diversity, like the bees, but even more so. So, and I'm sure you've heard about the murder hornets that were in the news a little while ago. Like those wasps are about the size of your palm, but a lot of them can be the size of your thumb. So they can get really big, but what's more important to me and more interesting to me is how small they can actually get. It is kind of crazy when we think about it, and none of these pictures do it any justice, but all of these wasps are between zero point 0.5 and zero point 0.8 millimeters, which is roughly the size of a grain of table salt. And it's just imperceivably small. I actually have a parasitoid wasp inside this vial right now. Can you see it? No, of course you can't see it because it's so tiny. I can barely see it. I almost threw this away because I forgot I had it in there. They're tiny, but they're everywhere and they're doing the Lord's work by taking care of all these pest bugs that we have. So, in conclusion, all wasp, we love you. You're beneficial parts of the ecosystem. It's about time we stop hating on wasps. They're beneficial too. All right. So with the final bit of my time, I don't have enough time to go into all the facets of how awesome these organisms are. Um, I want to talk about how diversity is not really a linear process like some of us may think. So right now you might be thinking to yourself, oh, I'll add one Florida-friendly plant, and then that will kind of increase my diversity by a factor of one because I'm adding one plant. But in reality, diversity is exponential. It increases exponentially. So when you add one Florida-friendly plant, now you're adding dozens of herbivores that feed on that plant, which will attract even more parasitoids and predators that will feed on those herbivores. There's even this little thing called a hyperparasitoid, which you should Google it, but they only parasitize already parasitized insects. So the diversity that we cultivate after adding one Florida-friendly plant uh, builds on itself so much so that it's exponential and we'll get hundreds of new connections, adding just one different plant. So the take-home message is really, I hope that you take out of this that there's a whole world outside that we don't always realize and we don't recognize because we can't see it with our eyes. And so, even though we can't see some of the diversity that's out there, it's worth conserving. It's worth doing IPM, even if you can't see the beneficial mites that might be hurt when using certain pesticides. So, it's important to notice all the diversity, not just the stuff that you can see. And next time you're outside, just like take a really close look at all of the stuff that's going on plants. And there's actually this really awesome event going on at like August 22nd and 23rd, which is crazy. It's an event where just have you sit and you look at a plant for 15 minutes. So I don't know about you, but I would maybe go online and get like a really cheap hand lens, and you could use this while you're just looking at plants, and it'll and it's just adding some curiosity that's really just it's fun. Even if you don't know exactly what you're looking at, you just know that there's a whole new universe. Um, and so, yeah, diversity is around us. It's all around us. And so I'm going to end my section. And if you have any questions, of course, you can reach out to me. And I'm going to hand it over to Cheryl, who's going to really elaborate on the conservation of insects. And so hopefully you recognize why it's important to conserve them. And then we'll talk about the specifics. So.